The Larry Walsh.
Yeah, the screen constitution.
Okay, I want to talk to Larry Walsh again.
I bet he's
pushing
we
me.
have to do an IGA. We're going to give the old IGA. Put him in the green on the shoulder. It's got to be more.
I'm not doing a long time ago. Okay. I'll look into it, basically.
Right.
600.
Wow.
David?
All right.
I got back to Dawn that month from now meeting. Fine with me, yeah.
I don't know. He's too
Shameless.
We're kind of doing what
He was the other morning, never showed up after that.
I will, but I did not.
Let's just say your monthly is
I'm afraid for the answer.
I know.
Afraid of the answer.
for a round number.
That's in front of his wife.
If you show up, if they give you a check for 6750,
Exactly.
you call it saying you're $250 short. No matter how small that is. And we have to treat public dollars the same way.
It's just interesting.
I had been in the city so much, it's just,
Yeah, it should be easy not to piss me off.
I mean, in the city for purposes of our fire.
So I had Hanson in to see me. He called me a while ago about something wants to see on other stuff, which I'm okay with. He was in yesterday. And
No, if you got an outfit.
you know,
I don't have an outfit. Not anymore. My kids are all 17 and 18, 19 now.
I kind of wondered.
That outfit's long. I used to have nice real hair beard.
tax base.
I would put it on with spirit gum.
There's not going to be any houses down there. I don't think any more houses. So
I don't see any set guns.
Yeah, just you gotta have
there's no more big builder guy coming down there whatsoever. So take a look at it.
Good evening, and welcome to a special meeting of the City Council.
It's on, Betty.
Okay, now. All right, let's try this one more time. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special meeting of the Joliet City Council for December the 14th. What's the date? 13th. I'm trying to make my birthday hurry up and come. But anyway, good evening. The Honorable Robert Odekirk, Mayor, presiding.
We'll begin with roll call. Mayor Odekirk.
Here.
Councilman Dickinson.
Here.
Councilwoman Gavin.
Here.
Councilman Girl.
Here.
Councilman Hug.
Here.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Mudrin.
Here.
Councilwoman Coleman. Here. Councilman Turk.
Here.
Are there any citizens here that would like to speak on the budget this evening? Okay. And we'll call up the Finance Director, Jim Godotti, to discuss the City Manager's recommended 2018 budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. At the last budget hearing, the Council directed me to go back to look at the manager's recommended budget. And instead of budgeting for full-time employment, that would mean every position would be filled for the full year, to come up with an estimate of what the actual would be in the next year budget. If you see the spreadsheet, this is a spreadsheet we're all familiar with. I just cut out the bottom that shows the expenditures and the fund balance that would be expected given the new estimates. As you can see, the city managers recommend budget. In the bottom, recommended a use of fund balance of about $8.25 million. What I did is I went through, I looked at each and every department. I looked at the salaries and wages, and I came up with an estimate of what new recommended salaries and wages and the benefits that follow would be. If you look at the bottom right-hand, the third line up, it shows that given the new estimates, it's a little under a $5 million use of fund balance, almost a $3.2 million change. The methodology that I used is I looked at each department and I took their average salaries and benefits that they used in the last 3 years. That data is in the budget, and I averaged it out for 3 years, and I increased the average by 2%. As you know, the labor contracts and the employment is based on giving a 2% raise across the board next year. What I also did is I analyzed the departmental budgets and I estimated the salary and benefits savings for no-one retirements. Right now, we already know quite a few employees who are going to be retiring next year, and there will be a time lapse in between when we can actually hire somebody and when they leave. I also looked at people who would be taking steps within the next year, and instead of just budgeting the full step for the whole year, I tried to estimate when they would come in. So for example, if a person went from step A to step B in June, I would withdraw 6 months worth that step increase. I had to look at some positions. If you remember, the non-union salary study had increases for several employees. Those employees, I took it out of the estimate and put in what their actual salary would be next year. So that would be actually a small increase based on those employees who would be getting increases greater than the 2% that is recommended for all other employees. The result of this was we reduced the use of fund balance from over $8 million to under $5 million. That would leave our undesignated fund balance at 26.74% of operating expenditures, which would provide us 97 days, a little over 3 months of working capital. The target, as stated in our strategic plan, is to have 60 days of working capital. So I believe that would leave us with enough working capital so we can manage any unforeseen revenue reductions or expenditure increases. With that, the rest of the budget has not been changed. So that would, should it be adopted, bring our undesignated fund balance to about $48 million.
Mayor and council and I just support and endorse the revised use of fund balance as just presented to the 4.9 million. During the next year, we can continue to spend more time as we work on future year's budget, but I appreciate Jim and all he's done to narrow that down and would recommend at least you consider that as the projected or recommended use of fund balance for the fiscal year 2018 budget.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Gadati? Jim, do you know the just under $5 million, $4.9 million use of fund balance or projected, which is only an estimate, deficit of expenditures against revenues?
Correct.
Now, we've been doing it, this type of budget now, probably since 2015, the fall of 2014 for the 2015 budget. What if we averaged in, you know, because I know it's very conservative, you approach it very conservatively. So how has our revenues worked out, minus the money that was taken from the state, because that was well beyond our control or the community's control? Do you know off the top of your head, each year, how do I think we wound up with more revenue than we had estimated it conservatively, am I correct?
Correct.
So
2 years ago, we added 4.4 million to our fund balance. Last year, we used about 2 million of our fund balance. This year, we budgeted to use over 7 million, and the projection right now is to use 1.6 million of our fund balance. The last 3 years, this is my fourth budget, we did budget full employment. The council requested that this year, instead of being ultra conservative, that we be a little conservative.
Right. Okay, thank you. Jim, you said 1.6. If maybe my memory's wrong, was it 1.9 a couple weeks ago? Have you revised that number?
Yes.
Okay, and that's because revenues are higher than expected?
There was a request to reimburse the city for the money that the general fund spent on Evergreen Terrace. And that amount is now budgeted to move it back into the general fund.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I know Rialto people are here. Thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate it. Councilman Hug, I know you had some questions. Would you like to address them?
Sure. I didn't know if they were gonna make a presentation, you know, on the monthly reports, profit loss, analysis of shows.
Thank you for coming.
Sure. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm Bob Flato, Chairman of the WCM EAA. And everyone knows Val, our Executive Director. I'm going to say a few words up front. Val has done a nice presentation, PowerPoint presentation. It won't take up a lot of time, but I think it'll demonstrate kind of the year that, well, 9 months that she's experienced and a lot of good things that have happened. So I just want to start by thanking each and every one of you, city council members, for taking time to meet with us one-on-one. And I know we've met with the mayor 3 or 4 times through that time frame as well, so I thank you. I want to thank our board, and most of our board is represented here, if not all of them. Next month, this board will be together for 1 year. And so it's kind of a celebration that I expect we'll have a little bit of a celebration anyway. It's been a wonderful board to work with, and I want to thank them for their efforts. Of course, Val joined us April 1st of last year. We'll probably have a bigger party on April 1st because she's more important than we are. But nonetheless, it's been a wonderful year. It's been an exciting year. We've done a lot. The numbers will demonstrate that. I wish I could sit here and tell you that we're at the end of our journey, but we're not. This is going to be, it's going to take some time and continued effort. And we're probably going to be here in front of you several times next year as well. But it's all good news from my perspective. I don't think there's any surprises in terms of what we had expected or what the budget was, and Val will demonstrate that. And certainly year over year from where we were in 16 and 15 as to what's occurred in 17 and what we expect to happen in 18 is literally night and day. So with that, I'm going to let Val do most of the work because she did most of the work.
Mayor, just one comment.
Yes.
So it's been 9 months, right, Val? So now labor pains, it's time to deliver.
Well, we're certainly thinking that we're doing that.
And I want to thank you too for taking some valuable criticism. You're everywhere now, and that's good to be out and about, and you know, not like the former manager. You're out and about, and people know who you are, and that's part of the Rialto. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. And again, I want to echo Bob's original comments. We do appreciate you all taking the time to meet with us on an individual basis and get to know you and talk about where we're going moving forward. Councilwoman Gavin, we appreciated you kind of banding with us to try to do something with Colors of Christmas, and I trust you got the assets that I sent.
Thank you so much.
And Councilwoman Quillman, we did take your suggestion to send invites to star members for Celebrate the Season, and that's been implemented, and I'm reaching out to figure out a few of the other things that we talked about. So we do appreciate those things. Before we begin our brief PowerPoint, I did want to address a few issues that have been brought to my attention regarding the IGA. As you may remember, we did provide the council with a list of 30 shows by June 30th that was referenced in Section 1, City Funding Part B, thereby allowing us payment of the second installment of $250,000. Should any of you need a copy, I will be happy to provide one. Again, Section 3, City Participation, which references the city's ability to access financials, contracts, payables, check copies, and audit of the theater. Since their initial visit prior to my arrival, no one has requested access to any of this information. And last, Section 4, Rialto Reports. The Rialto shall provide monthly reports to the City Council Liaison, Financial Director, and Inspector General, which we have done. However, if any of you would like to be included on that list, please let me know and we'll add your names to the distribution list. So without any further ado, let's start the PowerPoint. Oh, that's me, okay. So we're going to talk about programming, fiscal year 17-18, and sponsorship. First, let's talk about sponsorship. In fiscal year 17-18, which we're about 6 months into because our year begins July 1st, we have, with a combination of sponsorship and foundation, reached $153,550. And if you compare that to fiscal year 15-16 and 16-17, you can see with only halfway in, we've made some incredible strides over the past. We have a 15% increase in STAR memberships and a 60% decrease in the non-renewals. Here is the actual versus budget numbers for the Q1. Office rent and income, as you can see, we have a $9,923 variance. Theater income is up. You may note utilities and expenses are up. Those are event expenses, and because we're doing more events, we have higher expenses. Any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Val, just so,
Yes.
what is your year end is June 30, your
Correct.
fiscal
Yes,
year?
yes.
That says fiscal year, oh, okay, 18, even though
Yeah,
you're in the current
yeah,
year.
yeah.
Got it, understood, because you got, I'm good.
Well, that was an easy question. Do you want to answer
I'm
any
good.
others?
No,
Okay.
no, I'm good.
And here we have our annual forecast versus budget with our projections at this particular stage of the game. We've had a marked increase in, or decrease, pardon me, in payroll, insurance, management fees. Pretty self-explanatory.
Quick question, Mayor.
Yes.
Valerie, the $470,000 to $487,000 projected loss or deficit, does that include taking into account city money?
No. Programming. As you can see, in fiscal year 16-17, there were 29 events. As compared to 6 months in, we have announced at this point and are on sale with 39 events. You can see the ticket difference, and then you can see the gross. Just as a comparison for an event that's been with us for several years, the Nutcracker, we went from 1,307 tickets in 2016 to 1,700 sold in 2017. And then last, just a quote that Brian Foster was kind enough to share with us that he gave at our It's a Wonderful Life. He opened up the show with saying, "What a difference a year makes. Last year we were looking at the 10th anniversary, hoping that the city and everyone could come together and find what was right for the Rialto. I want to thank VenueWorks for stepping up and so many others were afraid. They've kept the Rialto going strong, and now 1 year later, we can start to plan our 12th, 13th, and 14th events."
And I think we had over 1,100 people at that performance.
Well, I would comment that, you know, there's a big difference between where we were last year. And I really want to credit, Val, you've gotten credit. Bob, you and your board deserve a lot of credit. And the foundation deserves credit. Because you walked into a situation that the theater wasn't solvent. And I don't, you know, we knew privately what was going on. I don't know how much ever made it out publicly. But you had a theater that couldn't pay its bills. It couldn't pay its garbage bill. It was being trucked by hand to the township offices and thrown in their dumpster. So you have come a long way. I give you a lot of credit. You were up against it. And certainly the foundation stepped up and played a big role in this. But, you know, I hear compliments. I just was at a speaking engagement tonight prior to this meeting. And when I talked about where I was heading after the meeting and how the Rialto was coming, I heard nothing but compliments with the theater, how the programming is up. So I think you're heading in the right direction. I give you compliments and thank you for stepping in. It was a difficult situation that you guys inherited, but I think you've done a great job with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you again for bringing this report to us. And I too want to echo the mayor's sentiment. I thank you for what the board has done. Val, I thank you for what you're doing. You hit the ground running. And you have brought some things, you listened, and I thank you for that. You listened, and that was a great step. So you guys are doing great. It's coming right along. So we just wish you more success and more revenue streaming coming in. That would be good too. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes.
David, I had talked about the budget in general, separately, a couple of council members, and both of them have told me that, is there a restriction on this 500,000 for capital improvements only?
Do you want to?
So they can use it for operations?
Yes, this is for, there's no restrictions on it yet.
So
That's up to you.
We don't have any capital budget that was presented here. This is all for operations and basically to sustain the profit for VenueWorks. We're doing the same thing we did last year.
This is,
This is gonna be used for operations, which means that VenueWorks can continue to make what little profit or great profit they make. This is not going towards, the building is still deteriorating. We haven't accomplished anything there.
Well, I might respectfully disagree with that comment. We now have a number of private events that we make approximately, and when Val and I pushed the numbers, just under $400,000. So if you're thinking that the city funding is going towards supporting a profitable business such as VenueWorks or even Oliveri, we make enough money from private events to pay those people. We pay, it's got to be about $114,000 a year to VenueWorks for their management fees. And Oliveri, let's say 50-ish, a little over 50. So we're well within that dollar amount that we're generating from private events.
You're saying the loss is only coming from shows?
No, I'm saying it could be a combination of both real estate and shows.
So at the end of the day, Bob, you know, it's $500,000 short, just under $500,000.
The overall operation, yes. Yeah.
So again, if we don't subsidize, then maybe VenueWorks doesn't get its 100,000, 120,000, or whatever the agreement is. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't subsidize.
Right. So we're subsidizing.
But what we do know, Larry, is what we have proved is that the previous model does not work. There needs to be a VenueWorks. And actually, I strongly believe that there needs to be a manager of the property as well. The previous model, and granted, Randy had a lot of other issues, and Jan, you're absolutely right, nobody knew him. But that model didn't work. You really need a firm behind the executive director that's got a presence across the country, that has a relationship with these agents.
All right, thank you. You know, I haven't changed my position, and we can move on. We don't have to keep drilling down on the same spot. You know where I stand. This is, you know, at the end of the day, a subsidy. Because
you think
the stated amount that would be quote-unquote profit for services to VenueWorks is not being decreased. It's being covered by our 500,000. And the ticket price increases so that the people in Joliet who can't afford to go to the shows, which is a lot of people, won't be subsidizing those that can. So I really haven't changed my position. I'll leave it at that.
All right. And one thing, and I don't know if you want to speak to it, but in the past, this council and the former city manager, and well, I guess the last two, have urged the Rialto to start looking for other sources of funding. You and your board are doing that. Are you prepared to talk about that at all, or is that still private conversation?
It's still very private, Mayor. I mean, we're talking to our state representatives about certain legislation. We're talking to other governmental entities about funding, such as the city provides us. It's a slow and arduous process.
Well, I want to compliment you because you're thinking outside the box, and I think you're doing the right thing, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah.
You know, I think that the 500,000 in the budget for the Rialto, I think the board has not only met their expectations, but exceeded them, and exceeded what any of us on the council thought would happen there when we look at what was going on a year ago. So I think it's important that we allow the 500,000 to be in the budget, that the board can decide best where that money should be spent. I think they've spent it wisely the last year, and I think they should be given that opportunity again. And I know it's important to have some money for capital improvement, and this is just something I thought of now, and it's probably not gonna be too popular, but the 250 from Waste Management, is all that spoken for already, or is there any amount that could be like $10,000 of it that just could be seed money for capital improvement?
You know, I would probably defer to Mr. Gadati on that, because I know there is some allotted for the turf.
I didn't know.
And then I know we did add a fence to the turf project.
The community donation from Waste Management is in the general fund, except for $50,000 of that, which is per year that we have used to pay back the TIF fund for the artificial turf at the stadium. So it is built into the budget already.
But I think it's important that the board be able to do what they did with the last 500,000, spend it as they see fit, and then continue the reports back to the liaison and to the mayor's office and to the staff.
Which we will continue to do. Mike, thank you.
Mayor? Not to belabor, but I would respectfully disagree, Councilman Turk. No, we never established that the 30 shows were shows. We debated it and we moved on. There wasn't disagreement. In fact, you guys acknowledged it in our meeting. I think Valerie had said, well, I know that everybody agrees all the shows meet the criteria. That was never established. And so if you're going to move forward with it, are you going to put together a more defined, less nebulous IGA, or are you just going to say shows again?
I don't know, but I think it's every time you put the radio on or the newspaper, there's another show. And I think they've made strides, and I think they should be given the chance to do more of that.
This weekend,
I don't think they're going to do less than they're doing. I think they're always out to looking for more.
Well, we're looking at a budget with a projected deficit of 4.9 million that we can manage, and so we can't predict what's going to happen. We do have a healthy enough reserve to cover it if it does come true. But we're also looking at a good example this weekend. A lot of people around Joliet may have noticed and are used to the ribs on the streets before a snow event or an ice event. That is the de-icing agent, the beet juice. I happen to notice in my subdivision there wasn't any after Friday, because they did it Friday. And I happened to talk to somebody from the Public Works and Management, and they said, well, yeah, all 3 of our trucks that are 15 to 20 years old broke down Friday. We didn't finish the city. And that was on Monday. I asked them, I said, you get any back? I said, we got 1 back, and we're not sure we're getting the other 2 back. We have a lot of need out there. We have a lot of need out there. That's all I have to say.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Mayor, if we, before we move on, I would like to also bring up the, if the council so directs, we could bring back a new agreement for 2008, where the council also has the option of just building the money in the budget. But I would certainly recommend myself that we prepare a new agreement with some of the same parameters and bring that back to the next council meeting for your review and approval, which would, so anyway, if that's as you would like us to proceed.
I think that's fine. This would be the intergovernmental agreement with the
Yes, for 2018, because the current one does expire at the end of this month.
That's fine.
Okay.
And if I might request, when we move forward on the budget too, this really is the only grant, if you will, or financial item in our budget going towards a non-city asset that we're responsible, like the ballpark and so forth. So I'd like to have that voted on separately when we get to voting on the budget. We can pull that out because it is unique in and of itself. It's a unique grant.
Yes.
Just one comment. I would also like to commend the board and staff because I know it's been a very, very rough year and you've been through a lot of meetings, and your volunteers, you're not getting paid for it. So thank you for everything you're doing, and I know next year will be even better.
And Mayor, just as we, one final comment, and this comes back to one portion of the budget that I was looking at that I thought it might be helpful to just remind the council. And this does go back to the needs that are not being addressed in this budget. But I think it's interesting if you go back to the capital portion of the budget and you look at what the department requests were under capital improvements, it was $31.2 million. However, the amount as former interim city manager, Marty Shanahan, finance director, Jim Gadotti, and others, you notice to craft this balanced budget with the use of fund balance, even at 4.9 million, there's only capital improvements recommended at the level of just a little over $3 million. And I think that's very telling to go through and look at, as Councilmember Hug mentioned, there's a lot of equipment being requested, a lot of projects, but I think that's indicative again of the challenge and the opportunity we have, even starting early in this next year, to begin some of those discussions of what's that 5-year sustainability plan. Because as we know, many of these pieces of equipment will not last forever. And so I just commit to you that those discussions on a 5-year sustainability plan will begin early next year as we get up and going, but I thought that would be helpful. Secondly, there has been a couple of questions asked about what maybe is in and out of the budget. So I think, Mayor, as you turn back to the discussion of the council, maybe there's a few other questions that may come up as to what maybe is in the budget, what is out, or if there's any other questions the council has about the recommended budget. We'd be ready to turn back to you and answer those questions, keeping in mind that the public hearing is scheduled for next Monday night, and then with final adoption of the 2018 budget Tuesday night. So turn the time back to you, Mayor.
Any questions specific about the budget?
No, just one thing. Since I'm the one that actually made the request and they showed up, I do want to thank everyone from the Rialto for showing up tonight. You had to come here because of me, sorry, but I do appreciate that you did. Okay?
Anyone else?
Really?
I had a couple, I don't know if it'll be budget or not. It's been some time ago, I know, we had talked about the street lights on Stryker. Pastor Doors had came and I guess requested, the street lights. And at that time, and it could have been me, I thought we didn't vote on it or anything, but I thought we would move forward. I think we had requested that Mr. Trisman look into it. And then I believe it was said that it would be in the budget for this year. But I talked to Mr. Gadani and it's not in the budget. Well, we couldn't see it in the budget, so we talked to Mr. Trisman, it's not in the budget. I just want to know how we're gonna move forward on that, if we are. Again, we didn't vote on it or anything, but I think it was stated publicly that we would, if I remember right.
No, I think you're right. We said we're gonna, Jim Trisna, if you could get involved. I thought we were gonna look into it and price it out. Is that where this was left at?
And Mayor, as Jim comes up, he did provide us, do you need this memo again?
Yeah, basically I provided costs, it's about roughly $53,000. That's what we did from my end. I'm not the budgeter. We gave the estimate cost.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, do it need to be in the budget, or do it need to be voted on, or, you know, or how do we move forward?
And certainly at this point in time, you know, since it is not in the budget specifically, I think if the council wanted to make that commitment that we are going to move ahead, and I think in talking to Mr. Trisner, I think there is every likelihood that could be completed this year, but we would need to add it in the budget, and I would suggest it be done specifically. And Mr. Gadati could modify the numbers to account for this $53,000 increase in expenditure.
Yeah, and I might add, I know Pastor Doris was the one that kind of vocally requested it, but there are some residents that live across the street and been there longer than his church has been there, that, from my understanding, I haven't talked to them personally, that would like to have their street light lit as the rest of Joliet is. They've never had any street lights.
It is dark down there.
Down there.
Very dark.
So I just wanted to make that mention. So, I don't know, how we need to.
So are we gonna add it in then, unless there's objections, or how's that work?
I don't know.
I don't think we need to take a vote.
Just get the cost and see what it is.
Just have
Well, you said
staff just add it
53.
in the budget, and it'll be voted on.
53,000.
53?
If there's no objection, we'll go ahead and add it into the final budget, which you'll have before you Tuesday night to vote on.
Okay. Thank you.
53 for sure.
Okay. And then one more.
Okay. Well,
Just
you know,
one
sometimes they
more.
give you
Since that was so easy. I need about 10 million now.
Don't push it, Terry.
You know, talking to some of the NOPT officers at some of the neighborhood meetings, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Chief, the cadet program comes up sometime, and I know over the few years, we've been talking about getting our young residents involved, either in the fire or police, department, to become fire policemen. And talking with the NOPT officers at different neighborhood organizations, I guess it's been left out the budget for good reasons, and they're not complaining. But I thought we was trying to, move forward with some of the hiring for the department to be diverse, to help some of the young high school students to move in that direction. Again, it's been something that's been left out the budget for several years for good reasons, for economic reasons. But I didn't know if we're at that point now to look at it at this point.
If I can add, and Chief Formos, I know you've been part of this. The police and fire department have made a considerable effort in the last year or so in outreach and trying to get young people involved. I don't want to make this too involved, but would you two feel comfortable presenting something on Monday to the council, kind of outline the efforts that you've taken to do this?
Absolutely.
All right. Chief Formos?
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
Thank you, Councilman Morris, for that. Thank you. That was on my list.
That's all I got, because I can't get to 10 minutes.
You're out.
Is that it?
Yes, I'm good.
Well, I think we're good then.
There's no more discussion on the budget. Next is public comments. Is there anyone that would like to speak under public comments? Seeing none, is there a motion? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.
That is famous.